Okay, stop whatever you're doing, because I need to tell you something wild. Ancient Egyptian women had access to prenatal care. Actual, structured, documented prenatal care. Roughly 3,000 years before most civilizations even thought to try. We're talking pregnancy tests, birth predictions, dietary guidelines, and dedicated medical practitioners all the way back to 1500 BCE. And one of those pregnancy tests involved garlic, inserted internally. Yeah, we're going there. Welcome back to Survival Challenge, where today you are a pregnant woman in ancient Egypt, and your choices in the next few minutes will determine whether you and your baby make it through one of history's most surprisingly sophisticated and occasionally deeply weird medical systems. I'm your host. Let's see if you survive. All right, here are the rules of today's challenge. You are a pregnant woman living in ancient Egypt, approximately 1500 BCE, during the New Kingdom period. You're in your first trimester. You think you're pregnant, but you're not sure yet. You live near a city, you have access to physicians, and you have 3 choices for how to handle this pregnancy from the very beginning. Here are your 3 options. Option A, you go straight to the local physician, called a sonomu, and submit yourself fully to whatever ancient medical tests and treatments they prescribe. No questions asked. Full ancient Egyptian medical system all the way. Option B, you decide the doctors are a little too weird for your comfort, so you skip them and rely entirely on home remedies and magic spells passed down from your grandmother. Full folk medicine, spiritual protection only. Option C, you find a midwife, called a Kini 8, who specializes specifically in pregnancy and childbirth, and you follow a combination of her practical guidance and some light spiritual ritual. 3 paths, 1 correct answer. Your baby's life, and yours, potentially depends on it. Choose wisely. Option A, you go full ancient physician, full commitment, no hesitation. Okay, respect the confidence. You walk into the Per-Anka, the House of Life, which is basically the ancient Egyptian combination of hospital, library, and medical school. It smells like frankincense and something you cannot identify. You choose not to identify it. The Sewan Namu greets you. He's been trained for years. He has scrolls. Specifically, he might reference something like the Kahun Gynecological Papyrus, one of the oldest known medical documents in human history, dating to around 1800 BCE. This man is educated. First order of business? The pregnancy test. He instructs you to insert a clove of garlic overnight. In the morning, he checks your breath. If your breath smells like garlic, congratulations, you're pregnant. The theory was that a healthy, open reproductive system would allow the garlic's essence to travel upward through the body. If nothing, possibly not pregnant. Or there's a blockage. Either way, information gathered. Now here's the thing. Modern researchers actually think this might have had some validity. During pregnancy, the body's pH and circulation change in ways that could theoretically affect how volatile compounds travel through tissue. Is it exactly right? No. Is it completely insane? Also, not entirely. But here's where option A gets complicated. The physician is also going to prescribe treatments involving crocodile dung, used as a contraceptive or medical intervention in various contexts. He might recommend you sit over burning incense to encourage fertility alignment. Some of his remedies involve ingredients that are fine. Others involve ingredients that are not fine, toxic even. Because here's the dark reality. Ancient Egyptian physicians were brilliant for their time, but they were operating without germ theory, without knowledge of medication, toxicity in pregnancy, and without the ability to handle serious complications like hemorrhage or obstructed labor. If your pregnancy is normal and uncomplicated, option A gives you some genuinely decent monitoring. The Egyptians tracked fetal movement, discussed nutrition. They understood that pregnant women needed more food and certain foods specifically. But if something goes wrong, the physician's toolkit runs out fast. Option A verdict, you might survive. Probably better than nothing, but you're also maybe eating crocodile dung, so. Option B, magic spells and grandmother's recipes. You're going full folk medicine. Look, I understand the appeal. The physician wanted to do WH hat with the garlic? Hard pass. You're staying home. You've got your family, your traditions, and a grandmother who has delivered approximately 40 babies and has opinions about all of it. First things first, spiritual protection is immediate and intense. You get a Bez amulet. Bez was the ancient Egyptian god of childbirth, protection, and my personal favorite detail. He was depicted as a dwarf with a lion's mane, his tongue sticking out, specifically designed to scare away evil spirits. You wear this constantly. You also get Tauret, the hippopotamus goddess of childbirth and fertility, another protective deity whose imagery was literally placed in birthing rooms. These aren't just decorative. These were emotionally and psychologically meaningful anchors for women going through one of the most dangerous experiences of ancient life. And here's something modern medicine actually confirms. Psychological safety and reduced stress during pregnancy genuinely improves outcomes. So the spiritual protection? Not entirely without benefit. Your grandmother gives you dietary advice. Some of it's great. Eat more, rest more, avoid heavy lifting. Some of it is based on vibes. What phase the moon is in, what the river looks like today, whether a particular bird flew in the right direction. You also get herbal remedies. And here's where option B plays a dangerous game, because ancient Egyptian herbal knowledge was genuinely impressive in places. They used fenugreek, which modern research confirms has some benefits around lactation. They used honey, which has real antibacterial properties. But some herbs used in folk traditions were uterine stimulants, meaning well-intentioned remedies could actually trigger early labor or miscarriage. And if something genuinely goes wrong, you have no physician, no structured intervention, just grandmother, the Bez amulet, and prayer. Childbirth itself in this option happens at home on a birthing stool or brick, squatting, supported by women around you, which is actually not the worst position biomechanically. Modern midwives will tell you upright positioning often helps with labor progress. But if there's a hemorrhage, a breech presentation, an obstructed labor, the amulets can only do so much. Option B verdict? Emotionally supported, spiritually fortified, and potentially in real trouble if anything deviates from textbook normal. Now we're talking. The Yachni, the Egyptian midwife, was not just a folk practitioner and not just a physician's assistant. She was a recognized specialist in the specific physical experience of pregnancy and childbirth. And in ancient Egypt, this was actually a respected, established role. She's delivered hundreds of babies. She knows what normal looks like. She knows what not normal looks like. And critically, she knows the difference between a situation she can handle and a situation that needs escalation to a physician. Your first visit, she assesses you physically. She's checking your color, your energy, asking about nausea and bleeding, feeling your abdomen as the pregnancy progresses. She's doing something remarkably close to what a modern midwife does. Systematic observation and pattern recognition built over years of practical experience. She gives you dietary guidance that is, largely, quite good. More bread, more vegetables, more water. She tells you to rest when tired. She tells you which activities to avoid. She may use some herbal preparations, but hers are targeted and traditional in a way that's been refined through generations of actual use on actual pregnant women. She also gives you spiritual protection. You get your Bez amulet. You get your Tauret imagery in the birthing space. Because in ancient Egypt, the physical and the spiritual weren't separate categories. They were the same system of care. And she doesn't see these as contradictions. Now here's the key advantage of option C. She knows what she doesn't know. If your pregnancy progresses normally, which statistically, in any era, most pregnancies do, she guides you through the whole thing. Prenatal visits, dietary management, preparation for labor, the birth itself, and postpartum care, including breastfeeding support. Ancient Egyptian texts actually describe a pregnancy prediction test using grain seeds. You'd urinate on barley and wheat seeds, and if they sprouted, you were pregnant. If barley sprouted faster, male baby. If wheat, female. Scientists in the 1960s actually tested this. The pregnancy detection part worked about 70% of the time because pregnant urine contains elevated hormones that can stimulate plant growth. The gender prediction? Complete coin flip. But still, 70% accuracy on a pregnancy test from 1500 BCE. That's remarkable. Your midwife uses versions of these assessments. She tracks your progress. She's there at the birth. And if something goes wrong, if the labor is too long, if there are signs of serious trouble, she is experienced enough to recognize it and connected enough to escalate to a physician before it becomes catastrophic. Option C verdict. This is your best shot. Not perfect. Nothing in 1500 BCE is perfect, but it's structured, experienced, practically wise, and appropriately humble about its own limits. The correct answer is option C. Option C, the midwife, the KEN-ED, represents what modern medical historians consider the most evidence-based and safest approach available in ancient Egypt for routine pregnancy management. Here's why the other options fall short. Option A, the full physician route, sounds impressive, and the Egyptian medical tradition genuinely was impressive. The Kahun Papyrus describes gynecological conditions with real clinical detail. But physicians in this era also had access to treatments we now know were harmful, and their framework didn't always distinguish between conditions that needed intervention and conditions that needed patience. For uncomplicated pregnancies, you might be over-medicalized with things that could hurt more than help. Option B, pure folk medicine, has real psychological and some practical value, but zero safety net if something goes seriously wrong. And something going seriously wrong in childbirth wasn't rare. Maternal mortality in the ancient world was significant. Estimates suggest somewhere between 1% and 5% of births resulted in maternal death, with higher rates in complicated presentations. Grandmother love is powerful. It is not, unfortunately, a substitute for recognizing obstructed labor. Option C works because the midwife operates at the intersection of accumulated practical wisdom, established spiritual support, and appropriate escalation. She's the specialist. This was her whole job, and she'd seen enough variations of normal and abnormal to tell the difference. Now, the garlic fact. The garlic insertion pregnancy test, described in ancient texts, is one of history's most famous "is this real medicine or ancient weirdness" debates. And the actual answer is kind of both. The underlying theory that a non-pregnant uterus might be closed or blocked, and that a pregnant, open system would allow garlic's volatile compounds to travel through tissue and eventually reach the breath, is not pure fantasy. During pregnancy, the cervix does change. Blood flow increases dramatically. The body's chemistry shifts. Some researchers believe there's a plausible physical mechanism. Is it a reliable test? No. But as a first pass, low-resource screening tool in 1500 BCE, it was doing something. And the people using it were doing so in a systematic, documented, repeatable way, which is more than most civilizations were managing at the time. Here's what makes this genuinely remarkable. The midwifery model. A specialist who accompanies a woman through the full arc of pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, combining practical skill with emotional support, and knowing when to escalate to a higher level of care. That is essentially the World Health Organization's recommended model for low-risk pregnancy today. We didn't invent that. Ancient Egypt had it 3,500 years ago. The grain seed pregnancy test, urinating on seeds to detect pregnancy, wasn't just folklore. When scientists at a Johns Hopkins affiliated lab tested it in the 1960s, they found it detected pregnancy correctly, roughly 70% of the time. Modern pregnancy tests work by detecting the same hormone, HCG, that was apparently affecting those seeds. The Egyptians didn't know why it worked, but they observed that it did. And they wrote it down. And they used it consistently. That is the scientific method. Rough, ancient, garlic-scented. But the scientific method? And the Bez amulet? The psychological safety piece? There is genuine modern research showing that continuous emotional support during labor, what's now called doula care, reduces rates of C-section, reduces need for pain medication, and shortens labor duration. Having people around you who are calm, experienced, and confident that you can do this, that matters physiologically. Ancient Egyptian women had doulas. They just called them midwives and gave them better accessories. The ancient world was not primitive. It was earlier. There's a difference. And the women navigating pregnancy in ancient Egypt were doing so within a system that took their health seriously enough to write it down, refine it over generations, and create dedicated specialists whose entire professional purpose was making sure mothers and babies survived. That deserves more credit than it usually gets. All right, you made it. You and your ancient Egyptian baby are alive. The Bez amulet is doing its job on the wall, and you have a newfound respect for both ancient medicine and the fact that you live in an era with epidurals. Tell me in the comments, Which option did you choose? Were you team physician, team grandmother's magic, or team midwife? And if you would have gone rogue and tried a fourth option I didn't mention, I also want to hear that. No judgment. Well, a little judgment. If this broke your brain in the best way, smash that like button. It genuinely helps more people find these videos, which means more of you can learn that garlic-based pregnancy tests were a real thing that real humans did with full seriousness. Subscribe if you want to keep surviving history with me. We drop new challenges every week. See you then. Don't eat the mystery paste.